Welcome to the Grief Pod with Venetia Quick. This is a weekly podcast which looks at every aspect of something which has or will at some point affect us all. And that is grief. Whether you've lost a loved one or about to lose someone you know, or perhaps you're simply trying to help someone navigate their grief and don't know where to start or what to say, then perhaps this is the podcast for you. Each week I'll be bringing you different stories and experiences of loss, love, hope and at times humour. On this episode of the podcast I'm joined by restaurateur Sallyanne Clarke. Sallyanne and her husband Derry for many years ran the renowned and incredibly successful Le Cruvin in Dublin. In December 2012 their son Andrew took his own life, aged just 16, and he passed away on New Year's Eve. And Sallyanne joins me now. Thank you for coming in. Can we start by talking about Andrew? And because everything I've read about him or heard, he was one of the brightest, most generous, sort of a real go-getter with all his motorsports. And kind person.
Very kind and very considerate. And he was a gentle giant. I mean, when he died, he was 6'5.5". Wow. He was a great big lad. But he was very kind, very considerate, loved everybody. Everybody loved him. He was a terror as well, and you never knew what he was up to. He loved his motorsports. He loved his school pals. I mean, the amount of letters we got after he died from kids in younger years who said that he championed them and he protected them against bullies, or he took them under his wing, or he, you know, as one lad said, all he had to do was stand up his full height and say, has anybody got a problem here? And he said everybody would say no. And he didn't like aggravation, he didn't like confrontation, but he would stand his ground and he'd go, no, you're wrong, this is not happening. And like they used to have a buddy system, I don't know if they still do. So, you know, when kids go into first year in a boarding school, they are lonely and they are feeling homesick. And I mean, even though they were home on Sundays and they were home every other weekend for a long weekend, and we would see them on a Wednesday and we'd see them on a Saturday, it's still some kids didn't see their parents for a couple of months at a time. So
they're still very young in first year.
Yeah, you know? Well, you know, they're 13. Some of them are 14. It depends. But, I mean, even on a Sunday, he would call and he'd say, who's cooking lunch? So if I said it was me, he might bring 2 people with him. And if it was Derry, he might bring 6. And these would be kids who didn't get home every other weekend and didn't see their parents every weekend. So he was always very considerate and he was always up to something. And I was always getting phone calls saying, we need to see you, Mrs. Clarke. And I'd go, oh my God, what have you done now? Or you'd be driving him back to school and he'd say, Mom, you need to fix your lipstick. You need a little bit more mascara. Mr. So-and-so wants to talk to you. And I go, okay, what have you done now? And it would be, usually he'd be caught smoking. And I said, you know, sometimes it's okay to hide. Sometimes it's okay, you know, just to go out the back and make sure nobody sees you instead of sharing your cigarettes with somebody else. And he said, oh, but Mum, that's not me. So that's the kind of child he was. And even with the motorsports, I mean, the powers that be in Motorsports Ireland will tell you that there's so many times he could have made that extra effort and been first on the podium, but he didn't mind whether he was second or third. He just wanted to be on that podium and he wanted to be there with his pals. So it wasn't all about the complete and total winning. It was about being part of it all.
So he's a sportsman.
Having his friends. Yeah. Very much a sportsman. It was, as he said, it's how you play the game, Mum. It's not that you win all the time.
And even the fact that I was reading with the motorsports, he went off and did his licence up the north so he could have it done before it was actually...
You had to be 14 here, but you could be 13 and a half in Northern Ireland. So he had all the paperwork done and he just put it in front of us to sign it because he didn't want to wait an extra 6 months. And so he was always up to something, but he was always ahead of the game. Sometimes I thought if he'd put that sort of effort into his schoolwork, he could have done so much more, but we'll never know. But you know what? He was a happy-go-lucky child and he made us laugh. He made us smile. You know, anytime you chastised him, it was, oh, but you do love me, Mum, don't you? And he said, of course I do. But, you know, you can't do this all the time. But I suppose a typical teenager. And I mean, 12 years on, I'm listening to the radio and about all these kids who are addicted to their phones and addicted to their Xboxes. And, you know, he was always out and about. And I mean, yes, they'd sit down and they'd play a game, they'd do whatever, but he liked to be out in the thick of things. If it wasn't on the sports field with the rugby guys, it was out doing motorsports or always something.
Yeah.
And he was like that from the time he was young.
So going back to that Christmas, can you tell us what happened?
He went out Christmas night and he came home late, and I was very annoyed with him because I thought, you were supposed to be home early, you were supposed to be whatever, and he wasn't himself. And Stephen's Day, we went to the races and he just wasn't himself at all. And we asked him and we talked to him, and sometimes people say you're better off leaving them and letting them come out of whatever. As my mum would say, let him get out of it the same way he got into it. And then on the 27th, Derry was doing a late breakfast. We were all having a late day, and he was up and down from the garage, and he was always fixing up a car, because even at 13 and 14 he was buying cars, he was doing them up and he was selling them, and we would help him whatever way we could, because that's what he wanted to do. But he was up and down, and then he came in looking for my new hairdryer to dry the wheels on the trim on the wheels, and I said, no, please use the old one, because I said it's going to end up covered in paint. And he was like, rah, 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 rah. He said, I have to go upstairs to get the old one. I said, yep, upstairs, off you go. So he went up and he got the hairdryer and he went down to the garage, and 25 minutes later we were calling him for lunch, and there was no reply, and I went down and I found him. So I'm a first aider. I have been since I was 16, and I had some help that day, and then the ambulance came, and the rest is, we got it. I always thought he was going to pull through and get up, and 2 weeks later it was, he was going to walk out of the hospital, and we would get through this like you get through anything else. Because
you did have several days then in the hospital afterwards.
We did, but they told us he was brain dead. And they told us he wasn't going to survive. And they did a couple of tests. And then the other thing that we learned, and there's so many things you learn that you don't really want to know about. At the time, you had to proffer somebody's organs to the organ donation people. They couldn't ask you. And there were other young men in that ICU. Some of them were very sick. Some of them had motorbike and car accidents. And a lot of them weren't going to pull through either. But they couldn't ask you to donate the organs. You had to actually offer. So when we knew he wasn't going to pull through, we had the conversation and we said, look, my mum had been very sick about a year before, and my dad had died before Andrew was born. So she'd been saying, I want this at my funeral, that at my funeral, and if anything's any good to anybody, let them have it, let them take it, let them, And Andrew was with me in the car saying, Mum, I want to be buried like Nana, and I'd like this song played at my funeral. And, and I said, well, if anybody wants anything that I've got left, eyes, lung, liver, whatever, let them have it. And he said, I do too, Mum. So we'd already had all those conversations inadvertently. And so when the time came, we knew he would want to give his organs. So in the end, they took his kidneys and his liver. They couldn't take his heart and his lungs because he's such a big lad, and he was AB positive, which is quite rare. And apparently you can put a smaller heart into a larger person, but you can't put a bigger one into a smaller person. So when they came back and they said because of the brain dead activity, they can't use your eyes, they can't use... and then they said they couldn't use his heart and his lungs. And then they did ask if they could take them for research purposes, and I said no. I said if they can't use them, I said please just leave them where they are. So we did get a lovely letter about 2 years later from a man who was in his late 50s who had got one of his kidneys.
Wow.
And said how his life had changed, and because he was a rare blood type, he never thought it was going to happen. And we don't know where the other kidney or his liver went, but we do know that at least one man had 3 young boys and said that his life had changed so much for the better, and that he never thought that this was going to happen. And thank you for the gift of life, which basically what organ donation is, whether it's a live donor or whether it's a donor like Andrew.
And how does that make you feel? Like, does that give you some sort of comfort that he was still helping people?
He's still helping people, and there's people out there the better for his donation. And we knew that would have been his wishes. So I think if with the new system, it's great. And anybody that hasn't signed up to it, I recommend that they do, because people don't realise that it is a gift of life, and that the difference between a lot of people surviving on dialysis and having a donor for if it's no good to you anymore, why don't you hand it over? Why don't you pass it on? I mean, God forbid, if anything happened to me tomorrow, I've left instructions. Anything that's of any use to anybody, please take. If they can't use it, leave it where it is. I don't want little bits of me in a jar
Test
in a
tube,
laboratory
yeah.
somewhere. Yeah, that wouldn't appeal
But
to me.
it's very much a conversation that I think it's great you're bringing it up, because it's a conversation you need to have
And lots
before,
of people
because you don't think, no, and you
No.
don't, certainly if it's a sudden death or a tragic death, it's not something you sort of go, oh, must do that.
Yeah.
You know, it's only really if it's something you've talked about. You mightn't even remember if they've a card or not, or if that was something they wanted, unless you'd had that conversation.
Well, now we've got the opt-in system when you're doing your driving licence. And for anybody that doesn't have a driving licence, I do recommend they carry a donor card. Because, I mean, the difference, we have a friend who last year gave her kidney to her son. And the difference within hours of the transplant was incredible. So it really is something that people should talk about, whether it's just within their own family or bring it up in school or bring it up somewhere, that it's, you know, I mean, you're not going to need them anymore. So why not let somebody else have the benefit of that extra life?
Yeah.
And I do really think that it should be pushed a little bit more. I mean, the Irish Kidney Association do fantastic work, and there is a reciprocal arrangement with the UK. So if you do have a rare blood type, or you do have some other anomalies that can't be sorted out, because I mean, we've only got a small population here.
Yeah.
And the fact that we do have a reciprocal arrangement, I mean, his liver and his other kidney could be in the UK, I don't know, but the fact that somebody was able to use them is fantastic, and I do think it should be pushed a lot more.
Okay. Now, what after this happened, you guys had to get back on your feet.
We did.
And had to go back to work.
You know, when it happened, we didn't say anything to anybody, because there is, with young people, there is I'm not sure of all the details now because it changes in the last 12 years, but there was a 500% chance of somebody doing what he did, you know, within a short space of time. And then it goes down to 400, 300, 200. And he had done a retreat the week before in school with a whole lot of his classmates. So we were trying to keep everything together, as the school had asked that we don't release all the details until they get the kids back to school, and that they can have them all together and that they can talk to them. And unfortunately, the press didn't allow us that. You know, we did say to them, we'll give you an interview, we'll do whatever, because regardless of how far we've come, suicide is still, there's a huge stigma. And there's a lot of people who almost think it's contagious. And I mean, he was 16. His pals were mostly 16, 17. He would have been one of the younger ones in his class. His cousins would have been 16, 17. So we were very mindful of all of them, that, you know, they needed to have somewhere to discuss this, somewhere to talk about it, and that they all had each other. And unfortunately, as I say, some of the press didn't allow us that time and that space.
So you're from the shock of what happened, and as a mother, your 16-year-old son, and I'm sure also there was a lot of, why didn't I see?
Oh,
why
we had
didn't I?
So many questions. I mean, I still have questions, and you always blame yourself. We still do. Why didn't we see this? Why didn't we see that? But I mean, when you have a wake in your house for your family and friends, and I put a book at the bottom of his bed for all his friends to write a little note on, and we put that into the coffin with him. And then you've got a photographer trying to get into the house to take photographs, and you end up having to get a security on the gate to make sure that only friends and family get through. I mean, it's a horrific time, and people just have no boundaries, which is really, really awful. But look, we did get through it. You never get over it. You get around it and you go through things. But we went back to work then as soon as we could, because we were working with all these people who knew him and loved him like we did. And you know, when somebody leaves like that, you know, well, they haven't left your life. I mean, we're the greatest country in the world to do funerals. I mean, we're absolutely amazing. And in fairness, the school were absolutely amazing. I was told afterwards that they got all these lovely letters saying they didn't know they did funerals, and could they book theirs, and could they do whatever. And I mean, the funeral between the priests and the undertakers and his pals, and I mean, it was all very emotional. It was all very, 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 very sad, and we still are devastated. I mean, you never, as I say, you never get over it. But to have the press on your back constantly looking for answers and saying, did you not see this? And did you not, do that? And did you not whatever? He was 16. He was full of hormones. He was an absolutely gorgeous kid who could, turn his hand to anything, but he could be moody, and he could be, as well as being funny and as well as being loving and as well, a typical 16-year-old.
And also, I mean, I guess as well, there's things that two teenagers, there are things that problems or issues to them seem unsurmountable, but actually can be easily resolved.
But you see, they don't see that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the old thing. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. They don't see that there's another solution. I mean, I've read so many books at this stage. I'm sure you have read some of the same ones. They put it down to like a mental heart attack, and that they can't see the wood for the trees, and this is their only way out. And sometimes I think, why couldn't I have found him earlier, and why couldn't I have done what I did earlier? But there again, sometimes you have to stand back and say, listen, I did everything I could. I'll never forgive myself for what happened. I'll never forgive myself for not seeing what pain or trouble or whatever had gone on in those 2 days. But again, like it's young boys in this country, young men. It's staggering. And apparently the suicide rate now for young girls has doubled in the last 12 years, which is very, very, very upsetting. So I do think we should go into the schools.
Yeah.
I did get involved with the teen charity. We did have things organised, and that didn't work out. But I do think it should be talked about in the schools.
There should be more of a conversation.
Yeah, and I think the best analogy that I could give when I did some talks in different schools around the country was when you throw a stone into a lake and you have all these ripples. And I said, they need to know that these ripples go far and wide, and it's not just them. It's so the first immediate ripples, obviously their family, then the next one's their extended family, then their friends, obviously their cousins, everybody else around them, and that this does not just affect them. I mean, I did the courses for being on the phone, listening to troubled teenagers, and some of the things that they said was absolutely heartbreaking.
And was there a common theme that was coming out? Is there something that, because we know now with shows on TV and conversations, the sort of things that do trouble teenagers and how different impacts on life.
I hate to say it, but I think it's social media.
Yeah.
I mean, when I went to school, if there was any sort of aggravation or aggro or bullying or whatever, once you left the school gate and you went home with your friends, that was it. It was done until you went back to school the next day and you dealt with it, and there was a short period of time and you got over it. Now you don't just go home. You've got it on your phones. Going. You've got it on your laptops. It goes and goes, and it's 24/7. And it doesn't just stop on a Friday evening when school finishes. So I do think social media, whether it's bullying or harassment or, I mean, and these things where kids say to each other, why don't you just kill yourself, or why don't you just drop dead? I mean, I don't understand that. We never said things like that to each other when we were kids. It wouldn't even cross your mind.
And they do say it.
They do say it. And they say it more often than you know. And to be able to Google how to take your own life, I mean, that was the scary bit, how to do it and how to, which is the most effective way. I mean, why would children be looking at things like that? And I think that's the thing as well. At 16, they're not really children anymore when they've got access to all this. And
but the problem is now they've access to it.
Everything.
Way younger than 16.
Yeah.
Which
so
is concerning.
I don't know. I do think there's a lot of bullying in our day was somebody being rude and horrible to your face. Now bullying is so many other things, and there's so many other ways of bullying people. And I think, when I would go home and say, oh, so-and-so was really mean to me today, it would be sticks and stones will break my bones. Names will never hurt me. Or, people would come home and say, oh, so-and-so said I'm fat, which now is another thing. And, you'd be told, oh, he said, you can always lose a few pounds. They'll always be ugly. These sort of things. That was the defence mechanisms. But now it's just got so personal and so nasty. And, I wouldn't know how to teach a kid these days to navigate all of that.
It's a minefield because they can also join groups as well online. They can add other people into a conversation, and then it's all... suddenly from 1 against 1, you've 10 against 1.
Yeah. So I do think the base here is bullying.
Yeah.
And bullying comes in so many different forms. And I still think the way to get to these kids is into schools. And I think you need to get to them as young as 11 and 12. I think by the time they get to 16, they've already got these habits. Now, I mean, I know my son from different people was a champion insofar as if he saw somebody being bullied or he saw something happening that he didn't think was right, he would stand up for it, even if it got himself into trouble. But it's not every child has that confidence. Not every child has that, or may not have the stature to stand up to somebody and say, okay.
But they're worried as well about getting bullied themselves and as a result.
And it's not just kids who bully kids. There's, the adults can be bullying kids too. And I mean, that's not looked at these days as much as it should be.
Well, adults have WhatsApp groups too.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they,
I mean, all these things on the radio now about, it's my game. And stop worrying and shouting at the ref and at the other players. I mean, it's really lovely to see it happening, but it should have been happening a long time ago.
When you went back to work and you run a restaurant, it's very social. It's, I worked in restaurants for years. It's great. It's a really fun, I thought anyway, industry.
It is. It's a great industry
to work in because, you're chatting to people and some friends will come in or people you know. How did you get dressed, go into work and smile?
I got dressed every day. I went into work, I smiled, but our business went off the side of a cliff. So I go back to the thing that we are the best people in the world at doing funerals and being supportive. But within 6 weeks, everybody goes back to their lives and you're left with this big, great gaping hole in yours. So on top of that, because of the fact that we'd lost her son, but I do think because it was suicide and because of the stigma attached to suicide, our business literally fell off a cliff. And there was a lot of people, we had an awful lot of cancellations. Now, some people cancelled because they felt that they couldn't come and celebrate when we were in the depths of grief. Other people cancelled for whatever reasons, but our business did fall off the side of a cliff. And at one stage we wondered, are we going to be able to survive this? So it went on for a while and, because...
And do you think that's because people didn't know,
they don't know
if
what
they
to
came
say.
in what to say to you?
Yeah.
Or they're going out for night out, should they smile? Should they not smile? Should they be taking photos? That sort of thing.
That's basically it. They didn't know. And I mean, again, there were a lot of people that used to come into us that supported us even more. And we found out at the fact that they had lost children. These were people that had been coming into us for 20 years that we didn't even know these children had existed. And they all told us we were part of a club that we never asked to join.
Yeah.
So it was a completely different, and there was other people that we would have been friendly with who were absolutely amazing when Andrew died. And there were people who would have been like, obviously your best friends are always your best friends and they rallied around and they were amazing. But there are other people we would have considered good friends that fell off the side of a cliff. And again, some of them I felt that, they had young children and I know it sounds awful, but there are people out there who they do think suicide is contagious. And it's,
Yeah, it's like on one of the other episodes I was talking to Laura Farrington and she lost both her parents, her mother after a cancer battle, and then a few years previous to that, her dad took his own life. And she described the difference in people's reactions. Like, was stark difference in that with her mum, everyone was there, everyone was around her. With her dad, not so much. No, it's just, and again, because when Andrew died, we didn't tell people exactly what happened because, again, we were mindful of his cousins, his friends and his close community in the school. And like there was 75 in that year. So you didn't want any one of them thinking, well, I'm going to do what he did, which happens. And we didn't want that to happen. Like a copycat type.
Yeah.
Wow.
And as I say, it happens very quickly afterwards. And especially the fact that so many of them had been on a retreat the week before Christmas. So we were trying to mind everybody. And I suppose we didn't want to think about it ourselves. We thought, well, if we think of them, we'll make sure nothing happens we don't want any other parent going through what we're going through. But there is definitely...
So in trying to be kind, you were sort of vilified in a way.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, some of the letters we got, oh my God. I got, Derry didn't get them, but what kind of mother are you? And did you not see this? And did you not see that? Oh God, yeah. My mother
From people you
on
knew or
no,
just random?
Just random. Some people wrote to us who lost children through accidents, through cancer, and were telling us, you know, that be strong, that, you know, they're still around. And so many people were supportive, but we got some of those letters that were not very nice. There was one man who used to write to me every year on the 31st. Now, he must have died because I haven't got one in 2 or 3 years. And I remember showing somebody, and I said, he doesn't even sign them. And my mum's 4 years gone now in July. And my mum was just, a month short of her 89th birthday. She went to sleep. She didn't wake up. I found her the next day. Oh. But she had a wonderful life. And that's, your parents are supposed to go before you. Your children are not. But so many people out there that you think, you know, it's like keyboard warriors. But these are obviously older, that they didn't want to say who they were. They knew well enough that if they'd sent an email, you'd know where the email came from. So you got these handwritten letters. And look, you know, it was really, really upsetting. And I think my mum was more upset than I was. And I remember pulling out a couple of them, and my mum took them and she burnt them. She said, you don't want to read those again.
She was right.
Yeah, she was right.
I just, you know, this whole stigma, I just find very hard to believe is still there in this day and age when, and I think more so around kids, because kids are kids. Yeah. You know, we don't know sometimes what's really going on in their heads, what's going on. And especially, I think, well, I have 3 boys, 3 teenage boys. So I think sometimes, like, they internalise stuff, so they won't actually tell you
what's going on,
what's really going on. Like, they might slam a few doors or whatever, but it's only when you sort of, you know, are push and get to the root of the problem.
But you mean, Andrew and Sarah May were very, very close, and he didn't tell her anything either, and he told her everything. So whatever happened, we don't know. We'll never get to the bottom of it. But, you know, it's like when anybody loses a child. It really, as so many people have said, it doesn't matter how. The fact that they're gone and they're gone before you is just not the natural order of events. So,
and no one should have to do it.
Yeah, no one should have to do it. But, you know, I was saying to you before we started recording, I've been going to mediums since I got my first pay packet. I was working during the summer. My parents were shopkeepers, so I always had a summer job. I always had a Saturday job. I always had a few quid to go and do. But I remember my first decent pay packet during the summer. I was 16. I went to see a medium, and I'd go to see fortune tellers, and I'd go maybe once every couple of months. And my dad died, and he wasn't much older than I am now. And I was expecting Andrew, and my whole world fell apart. My mum's world fell apart. He was 63. My mum was 63. And I remember my mum had gone to mediums, and we both went, and they said, no, he doesn't have any more pain. My dad was riddled with gout and arthritis, and he got meningitis. So there was an epidemic that year, and he unfortunately succumbed to the meningitis. But anyway, we went to this medium who told us that he has no more pain, that he's, you know, he doesn't have to take any more medication, that his hands, and he's dancing. He loved to dance, and he loved to, you know, do all the different things. He loved to go for a nice long walk, and she said he's doing all those things now, and he's happy, and he's there. And I remember my mum saying, when am I joining you? And he said, the medium saying, oh, he says they're definitely not ready for you yet. And it was 25 years before she joined him.
Wow.
But so, I mean, every so often, you know, you'd speak to them, and somebody would come through, or there would be a message. But when Andrew died, my first stop was to go and see a medium, and they said, no, you have to wait a couple of months. You've got to, and that was a long wait, because all I wanted to know was that he was okay. And I remember this medium telling me that yes, he was okay, and that my dad was there to meet him, and my dad was there minding him, and, you know, putting manners on him, I think is what I said. No, they'd never met. No.
Wow.
And he was putting manners on him. And I remember asking, I said, you know, why, and she said, look, it wasn't your fault. It wasn't anybody's fault. And it's not something he wants to discuss. So I still speak to a medium a couple of times a year. I'm very disciplined with it. So I do.
Do you do the sort of like milestone days,
Yes,
or
I
like the
do
birthdays, the Christmas. Yeah.
his birthday, and my birthday every year. That's the way it is. And I've been speaking to this one lady for about 10 years. She in between has told me that I know you too well. You really need to go, speak to other people, because she said, I actually know too much about you. And she has a son who's the same age of Andrew that's still here. And I just said, listen, I went back to her and I said, nobody seems to understand. And every time you speak to her, she tells you something that you couldn't possibly know. And that's their way of saying it is them. And you get little signs all the time.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, because you've brought in a gorgeous
I've
note.
been clearing out stuff, and yesterday, when you asked me to do this yesterday, I was clearing out stuff, and I found this lovely little note, and it's from May 2003, because any notes the kids gave me, between their teeth and their notes, I would always put a date on and just put somewhere saying I must file it away, and I do have a file with all these things, and it literally says I love my life. So and when you open it up, it goes, I love my life. This is my life. I'm a happy boy. I'm a good boy. I love my mum and dad. And don't forget my sister and my nana. I love my life and I hope to live long. The end, by Andrew. So, he would have been 7 then. And I thought, he knows I'm coming in here to do this today.
Yeah, isn't it funny? Because I would have been very sort of, I don't believe in the whole medium stuff. Don't believe in, but I found I have done the same thing where, so around Christmas time, around a birthday, maybe sort of around one of the kids' birthdays, I might do something, and then the odd time I sort of go, no, but maybe that's not. But then something comes out.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's the same with the signs, the little signs.
The little
Again,
signs, yeah.
Maybe on one of the kids' birthdays, there'll be something.
Well, it was like 2 years ago, I found a Valentine's Day card. And it was the week before Valentine's Day, and it was down at the back of a drawer. So and every so often there's still little things, I found mats before Christmas, and they're the cork at the back of them.
Yeah,
He'd
like a coaster.
Like a coaster.
Yeah.
He'd obviously had a little knife or something sharp and put Andy in the back of it, and I just thought, you little fecker. Yeah. But again, I'd never seen it before. I pulled them out because we were having a guest, and I put them on the bar, and I thought, you're cleaning them and you turn them upside down and you wipe the back of them, and I thought, well, I had never seen that before. So that has to be 12 years or more there. And every so often there's little things that, will happen, or somebody will say something, or you'll get a phone call somewhere. And there's this, as I say, I do believe in life after death. I do believe, I was watching a clip, Dave Allen, the comedian.
Oh yeah, the comedian.
And there was one that he did, somebody put up on Instagram, and it was he was talking to this young man who was a Hindu who died, and he said he met St. Peter at the pearly gates, and St. Peter showed him all around and said, that's where the Hindus are, that's where the Buddhists are, that's where the Anglicans are, that's where the Protestants are. And he said, what's that big wall? And he said, the Catholics are over there. And he said, why is there a wall? He said, they think they're the only ones up here in heaven. And I thought that was brilliant. So, I do believe in heaven. I do believe in life after death. I don't know if we're reincarnated. I'm not quite sure on that one. But I definitely believe that, they say we travel in soul groups, and that we all come back in different roles to
have different purposes.
And to bring us to a higher self. But and I don't know how long. Apparently, you don't move back again until you're all together again. So I don't know how long that takes.
So would you be quite spiritual?
Yes.
Then as a person, and would you be more spiritual perhaps now?
I probably would have always been quite spiritual, and Andrew would have been quite religious, and I would have been. I'm still a Catholic, and but I don't go to Mass every Sunday like I used to. I'd go every other Sunday. He would have been quite religious, and he believed in God, and he believed in heaven, and he believed in everything that we're taught in school. And again, you got to remember he's 16, and it was like, even at the funeral, my mum had said, "I want glory, glory, hallelujah." When those boys used to sing that at Mass on a Sunday morning, the whole place used to lift. And they said, we don't do that at funerals. It's not a funeral song. And I said, well, if my son wants glory, glory, hallelujah,
he'll have it.
When the coffin is being brought out of the church, he'll have it.
Yeah.
And then when my mum died, it was during COVID. And she'd wanted a choir and she'd wanted whatnot. And of course, you're only allowed so many people in the church. So I got a baritone to sing all through, because I thought he's the only one who can pull off glory, glory, hallelujah when her coffin is coming out of the church. So I've written everything down, and I did that after Andrew died. So all my funeral requests are written down, from what I want to wear to how I want to be laid out and what church I want to go to and what music I want played. And everything else, you know, is whatever they want to do. But I've just put suggestions.
And that's another thing that's important that people do.
People let you know what they want.
Just write down what you want. And it also makes it easier, I think, for the person left behind. They're not sort of in the aftermath trying to think, what do you want? Am I doing the right thing? Will they hate this? Will they not?
I know it's a little bit morbid, but I do think, you know, people say, no, I have it all written down.
Yeah. No, I get that. But I think maybe when you've had a tragedy such as you've had, and also since your mum passing away, it does make it's easier to do. Yeah. I think it's easier to go, you know, this is what I want.
Well, again, we knew what she wanted. She told us. And again, one of the best pieces of advice I got when Andrew died was to start a journal. And I've been doing it ever since. And the first one was the 5th of January 2013. And I've been writing in it almost every day since. And when I go and I give, I do give talks at schools and in colleges, and, you know, people who want to talk about their mental health and I want to talk about how do you go forward from something like this. And I said, well, you have to go forward. I said, you can't go back. And I said, you never get over it. I said, you get around it. And when people talk about grief, I mean, they say there's 5 stages, there's 7 stages. There's 105, there's 107. Everybody deals with it differently. Yeah. But I do think that, you know, where Derry and I were always on the same book, we weren't always on the same page. And I think it's important as well to talk, because I met a lot of couples that had lost children that split up afterwards. They just didn't make it.
I was going to ask that, because, I mean, working together is one thing for a couple. Losing a child together is
very difficult, because again, you're
horrendous. How did you survive together?
Again, he blamed himself. I blamed myself. I mean, even our daughter blamed herself because he didn't talk to her. And I mean, the blame game it doesn't get anybody anywhere, but there's nothing you can do about it. It's how you feel. And again, we did a grief counselling session, which we felt even worse afterwards. And we did it more for our daughter than anything else. And it was like, no, this is not for us. And going back to work was probably the best therapy, because we were working and we were still working together, but his domain was the kitchen, mine was the front of house. But we had, as I said to you earlier, we had all these people that knew him, because he would come in and work with us on a Friday night and a Saturday night. And when they needed to do their weeks in transition year, he'd have his pals in, he'd do whatever. We'd always have some work for them to do. Or if he wanted to save for something, and I'd say, well, come in and work. You can do the glass wash up, you can do the bar, you can do whatever. We'll pay you for doing it. That's the way I was brought up. If you want money, you've got to work for it. So everybody knew him. Everybody thought he was a great character. So if something came up, they'd say, oh my God, do you remember when he did this? And do you remember when he did that? And that was great therapy for us as well.
And it's actually very comforting, you know, because that's also come up a lot, the people not mentioning the person by name. And
Derry had been involved with Pieta House before he died, and we'd always done work with them, and we won't talk about the other one before that, but anyway, I got involved with the teen charity, and we threw ourselves into different things to try and help other people, and by that way you're helping yourself. And there's so many households in this country that have been touched by suicide, and not just teens. As you say, their fathers, their mothers, their sisters, their brothers, at any age. I mean, I heard of a suicide there a couple of weeks ago, and they were 82 years of age. They'd been diagnosed with cancer. They didn't want to go through all the treatment. And it's like we saw Esther Manson's very ill, and she wanted to go to
Switzerland.
Digitas, yes, and she's not well enough to travel. And her daughter was trying to make a case for her to be able to have assisted dying in the UK, but obviously it's against the law. So I do think we need to think about different things and different ways of doing it. But I mean, life is precious, and we should always treasure it. But if somebody is that ill and they are in pain and things are not going to get better, I do think they should have the choice. I would like to have that choice. I mean, if your pet is ill, the vet puts him down. Yeah. You know, I mean, I don't see why we should be any different if you're in that bad a state. But I mean, that's my own personal choice. Yeah,
and but I think it is something that will. Keith Barry actually discussed it after his dad passed away on the podcast, and I think it's something that will gather a lot of momentum in the coming years as people sort of are more open to it.
Yeah,
I think as well.
I think because we were so controlled by the church and state for so long here. Now that we've kind of burst out of those confines, that we're looking at things much more quickly. I mean, we're so advanced in everything we do in this country, but there's certain things that we can go that little bit further and that we can look at. And I mean, it's horrible to see somebody in so much pain and you not be able to do something for them. Mm-hmm. There should be a choice in that regard.
And they should have that choice.
They should, yeah.
How are you today? Because you've a new grandchild.
We are delighted.
Your daughter's married.
She married a couple of years ago, yeah. So was she 4 years married this year? And she's
little grandson.
Little grandson, Theodore, yeah. So Theo is adorable. And again, speaking to the medium, she said, because Andrew's birthday was a couple of weeks ago, he said he's having great fun with the baby. And isn't he adorable and isn't he great? And, she said, Mum, he's going to be much more naughty than I ever was. And I thought, Mum, that's the way it goes. But he is adorable. Yeah. Now, Sarah May lives in Bristol, but she's back and forth and we're back and forth. And yes, it's lovely. New life is always wonderful.
And has that given you, I was going to ask, like new purpose and a new lease of life?
Of course, yeah. And it's given us something else to look forward to. And she's very happy and James is very happy. And they're just, it's lovely to see them that happy. And he's a really happy, kind of easygoing baby, which is lovely. And she's a very good mother and she's taken to motherhood like a duck to water, which is fantastic. So, I remember the first time she left him with us, she hadn't left him with anybody. And she was going into town to meet her pals to watch the rugby match. And she was only gone 20 minutes when she texts and she was gone 40 minutes and she phoned.
Yeah.
Jerry said, he said, we have done this before. It's okay. We promise you he'll be fine. Yeah. And then she stopped texting and then she came home and everything was grand. But he's adorable and it is lovely. And all my pals, came up to have a little cuddle and to see him. And it's just lovely. It really is.
Yeah. And I'm sure, obviously Andrew is never far from your thoughts.
No, we were looking at baby photographs to see who he looked like as well. And being a boy, obviously he's got a look of Andrew too, but he looks very much like his dad and his mom. And they keep changing at that age. So,
but it's a lovely, positive, happy thing for you guys.
Yeah. So, and again, it's a new lease of life. And it's something different. And but I mean, I don't know if you saw on Instagram the picture Sarah May put up of Derry, friends of ours. They bought him a mini chef outfit. So it was the checkered pants, the chef's jacket and the hat. So Sarah May got a picture of Derry with Theo in his arms. Both of them dressed in their chef's whites. Now, Derry had taken out a big pot and she said, you're not putting my son into that pot. So he has him in his arms and they're both in their chef's whites and it's a lovely, lovely photograph.
Gorgeous.
Yeah,
gorgeous.
So it is. It's great. So we're really delighted.
Sallyanne, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Grief Pod with Venetia Quick. You can listen on SoundCloud or wherever you get your podcasts. We also have an online community on Facebook, The Grief Pod, or on Instagram @GriefPod Series.